You know what, Warner Brothers? I'm starting to think that at this point, that you and I are destined to do this forever. I don't think I actually appreciate how outdated a reference that is. Don't care. Moving on. So, Warner Brothers, Warner Discovery, whatever the hell they're calling themselves now, post-merger. Okay, so originally, this video was just going to be about the very sudden cancellation of the Batgirl movie, which was finished. It was finished, and now suddenly it's not coming out. However, that turned out to be step one in just a rolling snowball of nonsense that has gone on. So I've got a bit to go over, and there's a number of reasons I want to do this. One, I want to try and give people something close to as comprehensive a look as somebody who does not have inside sources into any of this can give. Two, I want to dispel some of the stuff that I see people still throwing out there. One of the things that's tough about a story like this is there was a lot of stuff thrown out immediately in the wake of Batgirl's cancellation. I almost said Batwoman. That was a TV show. That was also canceled, but not related. Batgirl's cancellation, there were a bunch of rumors thrown out, and a couple of them turned out to be true, and then I see people assuming that all the other rumors thrown out at the same time were also true, and some of them have turned out not to be, at least not right now. So there's a lot to get through, there's a lot to parse, and as always, I want to try and explain so best as I can understand what the thought process and the mentality is, because I see a lot of people asking flat out, what on earth are they thinking? Why are they doing this? And I do think I can offer some insight into that. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not I think these are good ideas. I might say that, but I'm going to save that towards the end. But I am going to be trying to explain what the thought process and mentality would be behind some of these moves. So, let's start with the cancellation of Batgirl, because that's what kicked everything off. Except, it didn't. Not by itself. It was done in conjunction with another cancellation of another film that just didn't get nearly as much press because it was a smaller budget film that was nowhere near as anticipated. Not only did the plug get pulled on Batgirl, which was a $90 million film that was going to be released directly to HBOMax, but it also saw the cancellation of Scoob: A Haunted Holiday, which is the sequel to, I forget what year it came out, but the animated Scoob movie, and that was a $40 million. They're both just getting scrapped. And in both cases, they were pretty much done. And in fact, in the case of Scoob, weird little side tangent, they actually recently recorded the soundtrack for it after it was already canceled. The conductor or the composer, maybe it's the same guy, I'm not sure, but he basically said, we were already paid for it, I guess we might as well record it, because like the money had been spent for them to do the recording, it's just the project was canceled. So weirdness, and that kind of emphasizes how last minute, out of nowhere, just harsh pulling of the plug this was as far as the people involved in the actual makings of these movies went. This is not something that was writings on the wall, they're gonna put, they had no reason to think any of this was gonna happen. It was pretty dang sudden. Now, official word on this is a couple of things. If you, well, depending on where on the internet, especially here on YouTube, you go, you will see a lot of claims of Batgirl was super woke and it tested badly because of that, and that's why they pulled it. Now, how woke, like, which is a meaningless frickin' term at this point, but how woke the movie was or wasn't, we don't know. We'll never frickin' see it now. But they base that solely off the fact of the casting of a non-white actor to play Batgirl, because that alone is enough to set a lot of the rage merchants off. The testing not well, there's some truth to that, but specifics are hard to come by, and depending on what source you go, it's not across the board. There were some reports saying that it was testing quite badly. There were others that were testing decently, or that the acting was good, but the story needed some work. Like, probably needed maybe some reshoots, a little bit of re-editing. Not completely out of the realm of something that is standard. And even when a movie tests badly, when it is this expensive, it generally doesn't get shelved. The standard practice for when a studio has a movie that they don't think they're going to make their money back on actually releasing it is to sell it. Sell it to somebody else. Like sell it, 50 cents on the dollar in terms of your budget to somebody else who thinks it will make that money back. You just do that. Well, these days with streaming, you have the alternate option, which is what the movie was originally designed to do, which is just release it on streaming. You remove the need for any kind of rollout for the actual wide release. So you lose that expense, and it will severely cut down the marketing expense because, let's be honest, a lot of the stuff that gets released directly to streaming does not get marketed nearly as heavily. A lot of it doesn't get marketed in television or print runs or even online. It's like a couple of trailers, drop some ads on YouTube, but leave it at that. It's a significantly lower expense in terms of marketing it, or at least you have the option to go lighter on the marketing costs. But they're just shelving it and Scoob completely. Now, I talked about the test screenings and this other stuff. The official word from David Zaslav, who is now the CEO of Warner Bros. Discovery, he's basically pointing to an overall change in strategy, that there was part of the outgoing heads of Warner Brothers strategy that he just didn't think was a good idea, and primarily revolves around two things. The idea of mid-budget films really at all, or the idea of making films for streaming, as well as the more child-targeted stuff. He didn't think there was much value in either of those. And with Batgirl and Scoob fitting into that mid-budget, made-for-streaming, and children-focused, respectively, he's claiming that he's scrapping them because that's not what they want to do now. He wants them to focus, specifically when it comes to films, on big-budget, blockbuster tentpoles. He wants to be in the blockbuster-making business, none of this mid-tier stuff. Now, if you've been following Warner Brothers for a while, this is not a new strategy. This is not a new shift. About 7 years ago, I'm not going to go back and find out exactly when it was, but it was about 7 years ago that Warner Brothers said, we're not going to do mid-budget movies anymore, and we're not going to do non-franchise movies anymore. We are in the business of making DC superhero movies, Harry Potter movies, and Lego movies. So, spoiler alert on how that worked out for them. The DC movies just started to fall apart for them pretty much as soon as Suicide Squad was released to massively tepid reviews, and then Batman v Superman really failed to perform what they wanted. I know it made a lot of money, but it was supposed to make a lot more than it did, and then it's been an absolute crapshoot for them ever since. Harry Potter was going okay right up until J.K. Rowling opened her mouth and has now continually been damaging the brand and has made it controversial by association. And as for the Lego movies, even though they were all pretty decent, the actual returns they got on them were diminishing so much from film over film over film that they actually let the rights to that lapse. Warner Brothers isn't even doing Lego stuff anymore. So the last time they decided to go all in on big budget, it didn't work for them. And it wasn't that long ago. So I feel like the people who have been ousted in terms of making these major decisions, who had decided to diversify a little bit more, probably remembered when going all in didn't work for them. But now we've got a new guy in who says they should go all in again. And it's one of those things that, yeah, if these things hit, that's a good strategy, but that's a big if. And it's an if that Warner Brothers has whiffed on already. But coming back to Batgirl and Scoob, there's actually probably another reason why they were scrapped instead of just putting them on stream. Because like I said, they're done. Even if they're crap, people were still interested in seeing them. In terms of Scoob, that's a kid-centric movie. It was going to be out in time for Halloween. That was going to probably get decent numbers. And even if it was for train wreck reasons, Batgirl probably would have gotten decent viewing numbers as well. But if they don't release them at all, they get a write-down on their taxes because they get to write it off as a loss. And if it's the 1-2 combination of, well, these things don't fit our current strategy anyway, and they think they will make equivalent or near to it amounts of money just in the tax write-off as they would actually releasing the thing, then yeah, from a business strategy, that does make sense. It's incredibly callous to the work of the people who made these of the artists, of anyone who ever cared. How dare you care? This is just an asset. We're not going to make as much money as we want off it, so nobody gets it. It's what happens when artistic works, whether you think they're good art or not, but when artistic works are treated solely as IP and properties and assets. This is what happens. And it is, again, one of the things that, and like, I hate doing this. I hate praising Disney at all, but I will continue to say that when it comes to IP management, Disney is better about letting the art at least vaguely resemble art, even as they milk it for way more than it's worth. And we have way too many Star Wars things. And we're getting to the point where, even for me, who loves the Marvel stuff, we're getting too much Marvel stuff. But at the same time, they are still treating it like there are stories to be told, as opposed to, you know, what did the accountants say? Which is how Warner Brothers Discovery appears to be treating it, which is how AT&T treated it before. So anyone who thought that this merger was going to be an improvement over AT&T handling things, so far at least, no, it's really not. And I think, honestly, the most surprising thing is how much this just has not been run or consulted by the other departments. Because there's word that the head of DC Films, Walter Hamada, almost quit over this because he was not consulted, warned, nothing. They didn't even get a chance to tell the people involved in the making of this movie that it was canceled before the story broke in the press. So he was ticked. Word now is that he is going to stay on at least through the release of Black Adam, maybe more after that, but at the very least, he's going to stay on to them. But it shows, again, a disregard for not only the art, but these other departments. Basically saying, well, we're at the top, we're going to make the decision, suck it up. We don't have to consult you, which, like, technically they don't, but that's not how you foster a good work environment. And one of the other weird things that they did, and this one much less reported, was they have apparently started removing movies that were made for the streaming services. There's at least 6 that came off, possibly more. But things like American Pickle, Superintelligence, The Witches remake with Anne Hathaway, those are all just gone off the surface. And again, no warning, no heads up given, no watch it before it's gone, just removed quietly. It basically got caught by Redditors who started compiling, hey, what's missing? And it was all stuff that was made specifically for the platform, which again, in terms of an overall strategy, does fit with this, we're not gonna make movies just for the streaming platform anymore, which is still weird though, because these were already on there. The money had already, this isn't like you're going, well, we're not gonna do that anymore. Okay, but you don't have to erase the fact that you used to. It almost seems spiteful in a way. Like, I think that was a bad idea. So let's pretend that it had never been made, even though I wasn't even in charge of the company at the time that decision was originally made. Which is, again, also kind of a factor, possibly in the canceling of these movies as well, because it's actually pretty standard practice that when a new regime comes in, anything that the old regime had greenlit, they will try and pull the plug on unless they are pretty sure it's going to be a very big success. Because if it's a failure, even though it was okayed under the previous regime, if it posts its loss or its bad reviews while they are in charge, they will still get assigned the blame. So that is a pretty standard thing to go through. Okay, what's in the works? No, scrap that, scrap that, scrap that. I'm not taking the hit for that if those don't work. But again, it's weird when it was something that was already finished. Most of the money that was going to be spent was already spent. And so at this point, it does seem a little bit more, well, at best callous, at worst spiteful. And then, of course, we have the announcement of the consolidation of Discovery Plus and HBO Max. Now, this is something that we don't know a ton about yet. And we don't even know what the name of this is going to be, though it is supposed to start launching in various territories summer of next year. So it's not that far away. So this was another thing this is one of the things that was rumored that did end up happening, getting confirmed on a sales call that David Zaslav had with investors. Now, some of the other things that were rumored don't look like they're panning out. Like there was rumor they're going to scrap all the scripted content. They're going to gut HBO Max. They're going to make the whole thing much more like Discovery Plus. They're going to lay off like 70% of the people at HBO Max. none of that really seems to be in the cards, at least not to that degree. So here's the thing. None of that really made sense. Actually, ahead of time, I didn't think they were actually going to consolidate these two services at all. It just struck me as a really bad idea. And this is where I'll editorialize a little bit on whether or not I think any of this is a good idea. I think that's a terrible idea. They fundamentally cater to different audiences. And not to mention the fact that HBO Max is 3 times as successful in terms of number of subscribers as Discovery Plus is. Now, that doesn't make Discovery Plus a failure. Discovery Plus largely deals with unscripted stuff that is far less expensive to produce. So it's okay that it has fewer subscribers. Consolidating it into one place makes sense in one way, but doesn't make sense in another. So it makes sense in terms of maintaining the actual cost of the thing. So even without, scrapping a whole bunch of scripted stuff, which David Zaslav has said he's not going to do, with the exception of the made-for-streaming movies and also de-emphasizing children's content, which does kind of make sense because, if you have kids, were they watching HBO Max or were they watching Disney Plus? There's only so much stuff on HBO Max that's really, truly kid-centric, despite how much of a back catalog HBO Max has of children's stuff. I don't imagine that was the most viewed stuff on that platform. Hey folks, I'm jumping in here a little bit from the future, and I just wanted to say that I want to add a little bit more in terms of the children's media and the animated stuff. I think I came across as a little dismissive. I didn't mean to be. I think I was trying to bring across that David Zaslav and Warner Brothers overall was being dismissive about the children's media and the animated stuff, but I think it came across like I was. Because honestly, right now, a lot of animation fans are kind of worried. Warner Brothers owns Cartoon Network and the entire backlog that means, not just a couple of random things. Now, this is kind of tricky to know what they're going to do because on the one hand, the main focus of what Zaslav has been saying and indicating has largely been focused on the streaming platform. And it is possible that the de-emphasis of animated and children's media is meant specifically for whatever the new streaming platform is going to be. So that would put in the crosshairs anything that is made for the streaming platform, not necessarily things that are made for other networks that Warner Brothers own that, end up on the streaming platform later. That said, there's still reason to be concerned because some of the other networks like TBS and TNT are having, it looks like, all of their original scripted material canceled, and they're just going to be homes to reruns and unscripted stuff. So they aren't not doing things to the networks as well. It's hard to know, and I do feel bad for anybody who cares about animation and or is a fan of Cartoon Network and its output. Now, if you're wondering why I'm actually sitting down in front of the camera to shoot this and I didn't just do a little voiceover jump in, that's because you're going to see me again later on because, yeah, there's other stuff. See you in a little bit. The whole thing makes sense in terms of consolidating your costs because the costs of just running the streaming platform, in terms of the servers to run it, in terms of having to maintain the architecture and the digital infrastructure to run 2 different streaming services, that is a higher expense than consolidating it and putting it into one. You can streamline it, you can cut your cost. So from that perspective, it does make sense. From most other perspectives, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Not to mention the fact that I don't think they've really considered the fact that if this new service launches and just is awkward or isn't great to use or feels like a downgrade from the other, especially from HBO Max, some people will jump ship. If it comes with a price increase, some people will do that anyway. And there's going to be some people who were subscribed to both. So if they are, back there thinking, okay, so we'll just consolidate both of these. We've got 70 million some people on HBO Max, 20 some odd million on Discovery Plus. We'll mix those together and we'll consolidate both. It'll be around 100 million right off the bat. Well, no. Some people will already be subscribed to both. So instead of getting 2 subscriptions from them, now you've only got 1. How many people is that? I have absolutely no idea. But this overall notion of, we'll just combine these 2 things and there will be no loss. It's just adding them together. Like, no, that's not how that works. And as I said, as far as the cutting 70% of HBO Max, gutting it, I never thought they were going to, well, I didn't think they were going to consolidate them at all, so it shows what I know. But that's been largely debunked at this point, because they do seem to recognize that the higher level of interest is with the scripted stuff on HBO Max. So they don't appear to be gutting all of it. In fact, James Gunn came out and said very plainly, don't worry about the Peacemaker series, about there being another season. That show is safe. So people are definitely worried about the other stuff getting cut. But as I said, so far it's been pretty consistent, children's targeted, and films made for the streaming platform. Now, in regards to the fact that some films have just been taken off, as I mentioned before, it's worth noting at this point, this is something that a lot of advocates for actual ownership of property by consumers have been saying would happen. The fact that these platforms can just make something go away, something you like, something you would have liked to have kept watching or watched again, might even be one of your favorite things. Increasingly few of these things are even being released to physical media at all. And if it's not released to physical media, they can take it away at any moment. You don't have ownership of it. Now, it's a little bit different because this is a subscription service and it's not like buying it digitally on Amazon or whatever, but that kind of stuff has already happened too. There is an erosion of the very concept of you pay money and you get to keep a thing. This is actually very much across the board with businesses, especially digitally based businesses. They don't want the consumer to own anything. They want us to rent. They want us to pay them a regular fee for the privilege of getting whatever it is they feel like getting us. They no longer want a situation where we give them money and we get to keep a thing. This is true of streaming. This is true of video games. This is true of so much digital software. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do if I ever feel that I need to upgrade my editing software again. Because nearly every single editing platform at this point has moved from you pay us anywhere from, I don't know, $60 to $200 to get the software package and then you just have it, to you pay us a monthly subscription for as long as you continue to use it. And that for someone who does editing as part of their living, that's going to add up to a hell of a lot more money than what it would have cost me just to buy the thing outright. But I'm not given that choice anymore. This is ultimately a goal, especially with digital goods. They don't want us to own anything. So that was a little bit of a tangential rant. Couple more things to cover here. Zaslav is saying that they have a 10-year plan for the DC properties, which sounds good, except they had a pretty extensive plan before for the DC properties, and it didn't work out well. But relevant to that, he named certain specific movies that he said we are standing by. Because part of what he said with Batgirl is we are not going to release a product we don't believe in, which was kind of him throwing shade and implying that it wasn't very good. But he did specifically say, you are absolutely going to see the release of Black Adam, the next Shazam movie, and The Flash. Hold on to that one. I will come back to it. Conspicuously, he didn't say anything either way about Aquaman 2 or the Blue Beetle film, which has already shot, I believe. Now, whether that was an unintentional omission just because he wanted to put the focus on the stuff that is releasing up next and the soonest, or whether that was a deliberate omission because those are on the bubble, we don't really know. Now, we got to come back to The Flash, because one of the big things that people have been going on about is, oh, sure, you cancel Batgirl, but you're going to release The Flash with Ezra Miller for all the stuff that they're getting up to, which... yeah, okay, so we have to deal with that. David Zaslav did say, very specifically, we believe in The Flash and we're going to be releasing it. He said that prior to the latest thing where Ezra Miller has now been charged with felony burglary on top of everything else they've been getting up to. But even with that in mind, it's obviously a very easy thing to call Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery out on. You are going to release a movie with a star that is causing this much continual problem, but you're going to shelve a movie that didn't have any kind of PR issue whatsoever just because it doesn't fit your current business portfolio. And basically, yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. In terms of the strategy that Zaslav has laid out, the big budget theatrical release of Flash fits with what he says he wants the company to be doing. Batgirl did not. Does that make it a good decision? No, not really, but it does make it a fairly consistent one. Hey, it's me again. Told you you'd see me again. So a little bit of stuff has gone on in regards to The Flash, and this always, I hate when this happens. There's been breaking news, and it's not fully confirmed insofar as it is like leaked news about what is supposedly going on. Now, it's come from relatively reliable sources, but right now this is unofficial. And there's also, again, some wild rumors going around, so I need to try and quash that as well. But right now, it looks like Warner Brothers is in a bit of a crisis around Flash. I think they were doing what I said they were going to do. They were just going to wait this out. That's what they were going to try and do. But the thing is, it's not getting quieter. And I think they've realized that they can't count on Miller to not get in more trouble between now and the release of the film next year. Because, as I said, since Zaslav's last statements, Miller has been charged with burglary. So, they're still causing a lot of problems. And even the earlier stuff is still ongoing. That having been said, Miller does now appear to actually have been located, appears to be currently living with their mother, as best as I could find. I still couldn't find if they actually ever got served with like the protective orders in regards to Tokata / Gibson Iron Eyes, although they have spoken via text to Business Insider, but I couldn't find out if they are still in Miller's presence. I don't think so. The general indication I'm getting is they are not like in the same physical space anymore. But again, like trying to nail this stuff down is a real pain in the butt. But that's kind of the thing. Miller is such a wild card right now that the word that we have is that Warner Brothers is considering one of three possible actions. And these are considerations that would make sense. One, and this is probably their ideal scenario. One is that Miller does like a whole big apology tour, like sits down for an interview, a formal thing, and explains what the hell's been going on with them for the last few years. And then, says, I'm sorry, I'm getting help, goes into treatment for whatever is the most relevant treatment for getting them sorted out, because I don't know what's wrong with them. And neither does anybody else right now. That having been said, that they probably shouldn't count on that. Like, if it happens, Warner Brothers is going to breathe very, very easy. But it doesn't really seem like it's something they should be counting on right now. And even if it happens, there isn't a ton of guarantee they're not going to get in more trouble after that. Second option, which is what I think they were probably inclined to do prior to considering other ones, is that they move forward with the release and basically completely cut Ezra Miller out of the promotion. Do not put them out to press junkets. Don't have them, meet with critics or interviewers or promote the thing in any way, and also drop them and never use them for The Flash in any future movie. I was kind of assuming that was likely what they were going to do anyway. So that to me kind of affirms that what I've assumed they were already planning is one of the things that they are considering. The final option, and this is the one I do believe, honestly, is the least likely, barring so here's the thing. What Miller has been accused of so far, none of it's good. Let's be very clear. But when it came to accusations of grooming and things of that nature, they aren't criminal accusations. It was in relation to a protective order, basically a restraining order. Now, if they actually get charged criminally with grooming activity or anything with a minor, that could be bad enough. Or if they I don't know, if they kill somebody, that would definitely be bad enough. But the thing is, each individual thing that they've done or has circled around them is stuff that, Hollywood has a history of ignoring. The burglary, the weird assaults, all this stuff. Hollywood has a history of ignoring that. Now, it's pretty atypical for it to happen repeatedly in such a short time span with a single person, but each one of these individual things is something that Hollywood habitually overlooks. So unless they really ramp it up, I would be shocked if they do in fact end up shelving this movie. I'm not shocked that they are at least putting it in the conversation because, like I said, they probably wanted this to go away. They probably did not even consider the fact that canceling Batgirl was going to make people really ramp up and renew the calls to also cancel the Flash movie. For some reason, they didn't think people would make that connection between those two, but now it has. And if there's one thing corporations hate, it's losing control of the narrative, and they don't have control of this narrative right now. So which of these three do I think will happen? Honestly, I still think the second one. I still think that is most likely. I would be shocked if Miller actually settles down enough to go into treatment, make an apology video, whatever, considering that they haven't for anything they've done up to this point, and this has been going on for a while. And the actual shelving of it, again, for how expensive it is, how much probably hinges on it narratively for what the future plans of the supposed 10-year plan are, I'd be really surprised if they shelve it. But they do appear to be at least considering it. Now, I did say there are some wild rumors out there. I saw things floating around like claims that David Zaslav didn't even want to consider shelving it, but he was overruled by the board of directors who insist that we have this as a plan, that like they're actively talking to Ezra Miller and like trying to force them to make this apology video or all this other stuff. None of that's verified. I could not source any of that. And when I tried to track it back, it was like Twitter accounts with 2,000 followers. So while I'm not going to say any of that is definitively not true, I have nothing that I actually trust for it. The three options that they're considering, I could find relatively reliable sources on that. Okay, yeah. Back to whatever old me said to wrap this out. One other like weird side note that I found while digging around for stuff on this. Apparently, Warner Bros. Discovery has refused the official licensing of clips from the Snyder Cut. I forget what company it was, but some company was like putting something together and they just tried to license some clips that they were going to use in the thing. And they refused because that's not the official Justice League movie. So, hate to break it to anyone who was hoping for the restore of the Snyderverse, they really do not seem to be interested in doing that, which, again, given that the Snyder Cut was basically something that was effectively a movie made for the streaming platform, and they're saying they don't want to do that anymore. Again, it's not surprising and it's not inconsistent with everything else they've said if they're trying to now distance themselves from that. So what's been the fallout from all this? Well, the stocks took a dip after that earnings call. That is an indicator of something, but it's not always immediately clear what. It might be an indicator that the investors flat out think this is a bad idea. Or it might just be an indicator that they think that the general public will think it's a bad idea. Because something can, on paper, appear like a decent business decision, but if you're dependent on hooking in the public and the consumers to buy into whatever it is you're selling, if the investors, even if they think the business plan makes sense, if they think the public won't buy into it, they'll bail anyways. So whether it is they just think it's a bad idea or whether it's they think the public won't go for this new consolidated service. Because like HBO, we had HBO Go, we had HBO Now, we had HBOMax, and it's like they're rebooting this service more often than they reboot the DC universe in the comics. It's actually gotten a little bit ridiculous when you stop and think about it. And it makes it hard to get invested in what the service has to offer when you're going, is this even going to be around in 3 years? It's hard to have confidence in a product that doesn't stick around. Again, to make a comparison to video games, it's like when a video game is released and like, we will support this online experience for 10 years. Guess what? It's scrapped in 2. Either because people weren't that into it, you released it in a buggy state, there wasn't that much content, or if you're the Destiny franchise, you decided, you know what? Maybe we will just make a flat-out sequel. So, like, increasingly, consumers are learning we can't trust these companies to give us what they say they're going to give us or to continue to provide it, even if they give it to us initially. I think consumer confidence is probably a big concern for a lot of these investors because we shouldn't be confident. They're going to keep restructuring, rearranging, taking away stuff because they can. As far as they're concerned, it's their property. They own it. They can do what they want with it. And from a strictly legal perspective, yes, that's true. But again, it's art. art is meant to be accessible. It's meant to be consumed and taken in and experienced. But this isn't art to them. So I think that just about covers everything. I don't think this is a particularly good idea. I get the logic behind it, but I don't think this is overall a particularly good idea. I think ultimately it will probably not be too bad for them. I think whatever the new consolidated service is, it'll launch. It'll probably underperform for what they initially want, but it'll pick up steam later. Or it'll just be flat for a little bit just because people will stick with it because they were already Discovery Plus or HBO Max. It's just a question of how much better or worse the service is and whether or not they stick around. But I don't think this is going to be the big boost they think it is. I think it's going to be gradual at most simply because, well, people don't have a choice. See, like for me personally, I'm actually a really bad person to go by, oh, should I keep HBO Max? What's Vera going to do? Well, I'm going to keep it because there's too much stuff on there that's related to stuff that I talk about on here for my living. So I kind of have to. But it's not something I'm sure I'd be keeping if I didn't have this job. I mean, to give it some credit, my kid was able to see Steven Universe on it. She really loved that. I feel like ultimately that might be the biggest positive takeaway. Oh, I got to see the Watchmen show on there. There we go. I got one really excellent thing. She got one thing she really, really loved. And the rest of it's been like, well, it's my job, so I guess I'll keep watching this stuff. I don't know. I'm kind of getting bombarded just by too much stuff in general, but that's a whole other conversation. Warner Brothers, Discovery, all of this nonsense, the cancellation of Batgirl, the consolidation of these projects, the possible future 10-year plan, for the DC movies, any of this, all of this, what are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon is what enables me to do this as my living, as I said it is, because YouTube does not pay well directly. Patreon is what actually keeps my head above water at all. So any amount you're able to help is of great assistance. Even if you can't do that, like, share, subscribe also help. And even if you aren't going to do that, it's okay, because what I really want you to remember is you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved. You are the council, I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. Time to give my thanks to my highest supporting patrons. That would include Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Emu Delkey, Theotha Boyd, Becky Sparks, Fernabi Likes the Poodle, Zach, Idolin, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Shayla Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. If you want your name said while these guys try and distract me, consider looking at the rewards on my Patreon.